What happens when a single moment of prejudice spirals into a career-ending, life-altering catastrophe? In the chaotic bustle of New York's JFK airport, one flight attendant, secure in her authority, makes a judgment call. She sees a young black boy flying alone in first class and decides he doesn't belong. Fueled by suspicion, she confronts him, her voice dripping with condescension. But when she takes his ticket and rips it in two, she isn't just destroying a piece of paper. She's tearing up her entire future. She has no idea that the quiet, polite boy in front of her is the son of the man who owns the entire airline. This isn't just a story about a mistake, it's a story of karma delivered at 30,000 feet. The controlled chaos of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a symphony of human movement. The air hummed with the roll of suitcases, the staccato announcements of flight departures, and the murmur of 100 different languages. 12-year-old Leo Vance was an island of calm in this river of urgency. He sat near the wide windows of Gate B42, his worn-out grey hoodie pulled over his head, a pair of slightly too large headphones covering his ears. He wasn't listening to music. He just liked the way they muffled the world, allowing him to focus on the graphic novel resting in his lap. To any casual observer, Leo looked like any other kid traveling as an unaccompanied minor. He was slim with thoughtful, deep brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. His jeans were faded at the knees, and his sneakers had seen better days. There was nothing about him that screamed wealth or privilege, and that was precisely the point. His father, Marcus Vance, believed in humility above all else. Marcus was the founder and majority shareholder of the Vance Aviation Group, the parent company of Apex Air, the very airline Leo was flying today. He was a titan of industry, a self-made man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and intimidation in boardrooms from New York to Hong Kong. But Marcus was adamant that his son would never become a stereotype of inherited wealth. He wanted Leo to understand the world not from the bubble of a private jet, but from seat 7B. Today, however, was a special occasion, a reward for excelling in his final exams. His father had booked him a first-class seat on Apex Air Flight 815 to London, where he would be meeting his grandparents. It was Leo's first time flying in the premium cabin, alone, a small test of responsibility. Remember, Leo Marcus had told him that morning, his large hand gently resting on his son's shoulder. Treat everyone with respect, from the person who cleans the floors to the person who flies the plane. Your name doesn't give you a free pass. Your character does. Leo took those words to heart. He was polite to the check-in agent, said thank you to the TSA officer, and now waited patiently for his boarding group to be called. The gate area began to fill. Businessmen in crisp suits typed furiously on their laptops. Families with restless children tried to keep them entertained, and a palpable sense of anticipation settled over the crowd. Presiding over this small kingdom was a senior flight attendant named Susan Reynolds. Susan was a woman who wore her authority like a second skin. With over 20 years of service, she had a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient and unyieldingly strict. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun, and her uniform was so starched it seemed capable of standing on its own. She viewed the boarding process not as a service, but as a military operation, where she was the commanding officer. Her eyes, a pale, unforgiving blue, scanned the passengers, categorizing and judging them in an instant. She saw the loud family and sighed with annoyance. She saw the nervous flyer and rolled her eyes. And then her gaze landed on Leo. He was sitting in the priority seating area designated for first-class passengers. Her eyes narrowed. She saw the worn hoodie, the scuffed sneakers the kid absorbed in a comic book. He didn't fit. He was an anomaly, a puzzle piece from the wrong box. In her mind, the first-class cabin was a sanctuary for the successful, the polished, the elite. This boy, she concluded with swift, unthinking prejudice, did not belong. Now boarding our first-class passengers, Apex Diamond members and families with young children, a voice announced over the intercom. Leo carefully placed his bookmark in his novel, tucked it into his backpack, and stood up. He slung the worn backpack over one shoulder and approached the boarding lane, his ticket and passport held neatly in his hand. He was one of the first in line. Susan Reynolds stood at the podium, her scanner in hand. As Leo approached, a faint, almost imperceptible frown creased her lips. She held out her hand for his ticket without making eye contact. "Good afternoon," Leo said softly, his voice clear and polite. Susan didn't reply. She took the ticket and glanced at it. Seat 2A. First class. Her eyes flickered from the ticket up to Leo's face, then down to his clothes, a slow, deliberate appraisal designed to intimidate. "This is the first-class line, sweetie," she said, her voice laced with a cloying sweetness that failed to mask its condescending edge. "Economy boarding hasn't started yet." Leo felt a flush of confusion. "I know. My seat is 2A. Susan let out a small, disbelieving laugh. She looked over Leo's shoulder at the well-dressed businessman behind him, as if sharing a private joke. "Right. Seat 2A. And I suppose you used your piggy bank to buy it," the man behind him shifted uncomfortably. A few other people in line were starting to watch. Leo felt his cheeks grow hot with embarrassment. "My father bought the ticket for me," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Of course he did," Susan said, tapping the ticket against her chin. "Unaccompanied minor flying first class. That's a new one. Let me see your passport." Leo handed it over. She opened it, studying his picture, then looking back at him. Leo Maxwell Vance. The name meant nothing to her. She was looking for a sign, any sign that this was a mistake, a prank or a fraud. But the documents were all in order. Still, her gut, clouded by years of ingrained bias, told her something was wrong. This child, in her view, simply couldn't have a legitimate reason to be in a $10,000 seat. She handed the passport back, but held on to the ticket. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside for a moment," she said, her tone shifting from condescending to clinical. "We need to verify this. Verify what Leo asked, his politeness now strained with anxiety. Everything is there. My name, the seat number. We have procedures to follow." Susan snapped, her patience wearing thin. "Now please, you're holding up the line." Humiliated, Leo stepped to the side, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched as Susan greeted the businessman behind him with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Good to see you again." She scanned his ticket and waved him through. Leo stood alone, the center of unwanted attention, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. This was more than a simple misunderstanding. He was being singled out, and he didn't know why. He clutched the strap of his backpack and waited, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on him. The storm was just beginning. Minutes bled into one another. The entire first-class cabin boarded, followed by the business-class passengers. Each person who passed by cast a curious glance at the small boy standing by the wall, being pointedly ignored by the senior flight attendant. Leo tried to make himself as small as possible, his gaze fixed on the geometric patterns of the airport carpet. He could feel the judgment in their stares, the silent questions. What did he do wrong? His father's words echoed in his mind. Treat everyone with respect. He had. He had been polite. He had followed the rules. Why was this happening? Finally, after the bulk of the premium passengers had boarded, Susan turned her attention back to him. Her expression had hardened. The feigned sweetness was gone, replaced by a look of sheer exasperation, as if Leo's very presence was a personal insult. "Look," she began, walking toward him and lowering her voice to a conspiratorial yet sharp whisper. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's over. There's no way you're sitting in 2A. That ticket is either fake or stolen." Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. "It's not my dad bought it on the Apex Air website. You can check the reservation number. It's right there." He pointed a slightly trembling finger at the ticket in her hand. "I don't need to check anything," Susan scoffed. "I've been doing this job for 22 years. I know a legitimate first-class passenger when I see one. And you little boy are not it. You're probably trying to sneak on to find an empty seat after the doors close. I've seen it all before." "That's not true." Leo's voice rose a tremor of indignation, cutting through his fear. "I have a seat. You're holding my ticket." A junior gate agent at the adjacent counter, a young woman named Maria, looked over with concern. She could see the boy was genuinely distressed, and that Susan was far overstepping her authority. Susan Maria said tentatively, "Maybe you should just scan it. The system will tell you if it's valid." Susan shot Maria a glare so venomous it could have curdled milk. "Stay out of this, Maria. You're new. You don't understand the kind of scams people try to pull. This is a security issue." Turning back to Leo, her face was a mask of cold fury. "This is your last chance. Tell me the truth. Who are you with? Where are your parents? Are they waiting for you in economy? My dad dropped me off." Leo insisted, his voice cracking. "I'm meeting my grandparents in London. Please just let me on the plane. It's about to leave. The plane isn't going anywhere until I sort this out," she said, her voice dripping with self-importance. She held up the ticket, waving it in his face. "Tickets like this are for our most valued customers. People who have earned it. Not for children who think they can play dress-up and sneak into places they don't belong." The cruelty of her words struck Leo like a physical blow. It wasn't about a ticket anymore. It was about him. It was about the way he looked, the clothes he wore. He felt a profound sense of injustice, a helplessness that was utterly foreign to him. "Please," he whispered, his eyes welling up with tears he refused to let fall. "Just scan it." That single simple plea seemed to be the final straw for Susan. It was a challenge to her authority, a defiance of her flawless judgment. In her twisted logic, his persistence was proof of his guilt. She needed to make a point to end this charade once and for all. With a sharp, dramatic flick of her wrists, she ripped the boarding pass in two. Rip. The sound was shockingly loud in the relative quiet of the now emptying gate area. It sliced through the air, a definitive, irreversible act of destruction. The two halves of the ticket fluttered from her fingers and landed on the floor at Leo's feet. There Susan said, her voice cold and final. "Now you have no ticket. I suggest you go find your parents before I call airport security and have you escorted out for causing a disturbance." For a moment, Leo couldn't breathe. He stared at the two pieces of paper on the ground. Seat 2A torn down the middle. His name split in half. It was the most violating thing he had ever experienced. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on his chest. The few remaining passengers in the boarding line gasped. Maria, the junior agent, covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror. Leo looked up at Susan, the tears now freely streaming down his face. But through the tears, something else flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but a quiet, chilling resolve. He didn't scream or cry out. He didn't protest any further. He simply bent down, picked up the two ruined pieces of his ticket, and held them in his palm. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He turned away from Susan, his small shoulders squared, and dialed a number he knew by heart. It was the number his father had told him to call only in a true emergency. He had always thought that meant a medical issue or getting lost. He now understood that some emergencies were of a different kind altogether. Susan watched him, a smirk of triumph on her face. "Go on," she sneered. "Call your mummy. It won't help you now." Leo put the phone to his ear. After one ring, a familiar voice answered. "Leo, is everything okay, son?" Leo took a shaky breath, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, I have a problem." Miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the glittering skyline of Manhattan, Marcus Vance was in the final stages of closing a 9-figure acquisition deal. The air in the room was thick with tension and the scent of expensive coffee. Lawyers from both sides were hunched over documents, their voices a low, intense murmur. Marcus, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, stood at the head of the table, commanding the room with an aura of unshakable calm. He was known for his composure under pressure, for his ability to dissect complex problems with surgical precision. His personal phone, a sleek device that rarely rang during business hours, vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the caller ID, Leo. A flicker of concern crossed his face. He had a strict rule with his son: this line was for emergencies only. He held up a hand, silencing the room instantly. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I need to take this." He stepped out onto a private balcony, the city's roar a distant hum below. "Leo, is everything okay, son? Dad, I have a problem." The sound of his son's voice, small, trembling and struggling to hold back tears, sent a bolt of pure, cold adrenaline through Marcus's veins. Every carefully constructed layer of the CEO, the negotiator, the billionaire, vanished. In its place was a father. "What is it? What's wrong? Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with urgency. "No, I'm not hurt." Leo sniffled, trying to regain his composure. "I'm at the gate. Flight 815. They're not letting me on the plane." Marcus frowned. "A simple mix-up, perhaps? Did you show them your ticket, your passport?" "Yes." "But the lady, the flight attendant. She said I didn't belong in first class. She said my ticket was fake." Leo's voice cracked as he recounted the humiliation. She took it from me, Dad. And she ripped it." Silence. On the other end of the line, Marcus Vance went perfectly still. The sounds of the city faded away. The multi-billion-dollar deal he was about to close ceased to exist. His entire world narrowed to a single horrifying image: his 12-year-old son alone being accused and humiliated by one of his own employees. And then the ultimate insult: his ticket, a symbol of his promise, torn in two. A rage, cold and deliberate, began to build within him. It was not the hot, explosive anger of a tantrum, but the focused, terrifying fury of a man who could move mountains with a single phone call. "What is her name?" Leo Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I don't know. She's older, with blonde hair in a bun. She's the one in charge at the gate. "Okay, son, listen to me very carefully," Marcus said, his tone shifting into one of calm, precise command. "I want you to stay right where you are. Don't talk to her anymore. Don't say a word. Just find a seat and wait. Do you understand?" "Yes, Dad. I'm proud of you for calling me. You did the right thing. I'm going to handle this now. I love you. I love you too, Dad." Marcus hung up. He stood on the balcony for a 10-second eternity, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. Then he turned and walked back into the boardroom. All eyes were on him. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice like ice. "Something has come up with my son. We're postponing this. My team will be in touch to reschedule." Before anyone could protest, he was already dialing his next number. His assistant picked up on the first ring. "Clara, cancel the rest of my day." "All of it." Mr. Vance. "What about the ACG deal?" she asked, flustered. "The deal is dead if they can't wait. Get me Robert Slater on the line." "Now." Robert Slater was the chief operating officer of Apex Air, a man who oversaw the airline's entire global operations. A moment later, he was on the line, his voice cheerful. "Marcus, I was just about to call and congratulate you on the ACG merger. I hear it's almost done. Forget the merger, Robert Marcus," cut in his voice, devoid of any warmth. "I have a situation at JFK. Terminal 4, Gate B42, Flight 815 to Heathrow. What kind of situation?" Slater asked, his tone immediately shifting to one of serious concern. "My son Leo is at that gate. He was booked in seat 2A. Your senior flight attendant there just accused him of fraud, publicly humiliated him, and ripped up his boarding pass." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Robert Slater, a man who managed crises ranging from engine failures to international incidents, was speechless. Marcus, I don't know what to say. That's unimaginable. "Oh, you're going to have to find the words, Robert Marcus," said his voice, dropping to a near whisper, which Slater knew was far more dangerous than a shout. "I want you to call airport operations. I want the general manager of JFK, the head of security for Apex Air, and the vice president of in-flight services to go to that gate. Not their assistants, not their deputies. Them. And I want them there in the next 15 minutes. 15 minutes, Marcus, that's now, Robert. And I want one other thing. That plane is not to move. Put a ground stop on Flight 815. I don't care if it backs up traffic to LaGuardia. That aircraft stays at the gate with the door open until my son is on it and has received a personal apology. Am I clear?" Crystal Slater managed to say, already typing furiously on his computer. "Good," Marcus said. He was about to hang up when he added one final chilling instruction. "And Robert, find out the name of that flight attendant. I want a full report on my desk by the time I get there. I'm on my way to the airport myself." He hung up, leaving a COO in a state of controlled panic. Marcus grabbed his coat and strode out of the office, his security detail falling in step behind him. The cool, collected CEO was gone. The father was in control, and he was on his way to the airport to personally oversee the fallout. The gears of a multi-billion-dollar corporation were now grinding into motion, all converging on a single unsuspecting flight attendant at Gate B42. Back at Gate B42, an uneasy calm had settled. The final economy passengers had shuffled down the jet bridge. Susan Reynolds, feeling smugly victorious, was finalizing the pre-flight paperwork. She saw Leo sitting quietly in a chair, his phone, now put away the torn pieces of his ticket, resting on his knee. She rolled her eyes, assuming he had called his mother and been told to wait for her. Problem solved, she thought with a self-satisfied smirk. She had protected the integrity of her cabin and dealt with a troublemaker. She was in her mind a model employee. The junior agent Maria kept casting worried glances at Leo. Her heart ached for the boy. She knew what Susan had done was wrong, a gross abuse of power, but she was too new, too intimidated to challenge a 20-year veteran. She considered going over to offer him a bottle of water, but a sharp look from Susan kept her rooted to her spot. Suddenly, a crackle came through on the gate agent's radio. "Gate B42, this is operations. We're instituting a ground stop on Apex 815. Do not close the aircraft door. Await further instruction. I repeat, do not close the door." Susan grabbed her own radio. "Operations, this is Flight Supervisor Reynolds at B42. Why the ground stop our manifest is clear, and we are ready for departure." "Just follow the directive." B42, the voice on the other end, said curtly. "Hold your position." Susan frowned, annoyed at the unexpected delay. Delays meant paperwork and unhappy passengers. She was about to make a call to inquire further when she saw them. A group of 4 people in immaculate business attire were walking toward her gate with an unnerving speed and purpose. They moved as a unit, parting the crowds of travelers like a ship's bow through water. Susan immediately recognized one of them, David Chen, the general manager for all JFK operations. He was a man she saw only at quarterly town halls, a figure far removed from the daily grime of gate management. Walking beside him was a stern-faced woman she knew to be Eleanor Vance, no relation to the owners, but a legendary and feared figure within the company, the vice president of in-flight services. Eleanor was her ultimate boss's boss's boss. Flanking them were the airport's head of security and another executive Susan didn't recognize, but who radiated an equal level of authority. Susan's heart skipped a beat, a full-blown management delegation descending on her gate. This could only mean one of 2 things, a major security threat or a VIP passenger incident. She quickly scanned the first-class manifest in her head. No celebrities? No diplomats? What was going on? They arrived at her podium, their faces grim and unsmiling. Susan Reynolds. David Chen asked his tone, leaving no room for pleasantries. "Yes, Mr. Chen. Is there a problem?" Susan asked, forcing her voice to remain professional, though a seed of anxiety had begun to sprout in her stomach. Eleanor Vance's eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the scene. They took in Susan's rigid posture, Maria's nervous expression, and finally they landed on Leo, sitting alone, a silent testament to the drama that had unfolded. Her face, already stern, seemed to turn to granite. Miss Reynolds Eleanor began, her voice low and controlled. "We've received a report of a customer service issue at this gate. A very serious one. It involves an unaccompanied minor who was denied boarding for this flight." Susan's anxiety instantly transformed into defensive indignation. She had been right. The boy had complained, and now management was here. She felt a surge of confidence. She would explain her side of the story, her diligence, her commitment to security. They would surely commend her for her vigilance. "Yes, Ms. Vance," Susan said, puffing out her chest slightly. "I handled that situation. There was a young boy with what I believe to be a fraudulent first-class ticket. He was being evasive and his story didn't add up. To prevent a potential security breach, I denied him boarding." "You denied him boarding?" Eleanor repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Is that all you did?" I informed him he could not fly," Susan said, suddenly hesitant. The way Eleanor was looking at her was making her skin crawl. Eleanor's gaze dropped to the floor, then to the 2 pieces of paper, still resting on Leo's knee. "You didn't just inform him, Ms. Reynolds. You ripped his boarding pass in half. Is that correct?" Susan paled. "I made a judgment call to de-escalate the situation. The boy was becoming agitated. This was a lie and a flimsy one, but panic was beginning to cloud her judgment." David Chen stepped forward. "Ms. Reynolds, was this boy loud? Was he aggressive? Did he make any threats?" "Well, no. Not exactly, but..." "Did you at any point scan his ticket to verify its validity in the system?" Eleanor interjected, her voice cutting like a razor. "I didn't feel it was necessary. My 22 years of experience told me, your 22 years of experience have in the last half hour cost this company more than you can possibly imagine," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. She took a deep breath and then delivered the final devastating blow. "Do you have any idea who that boy is?" Susan looked from Eleanor's furious face over to Leo, who was now watching them with a sad, quiet dignity. "He was just a kid in a hoodie. A nobody. He's just some kid trying to scam a free seat," she said, the word sounding weak even to her own ears. Eleanor Vance took a step closer, her eyes boring into Susan's. That kid, Ms. Reynolds, is Leo Vance. He is the son of Marcus Vance, the founder of the Vance Aviation Group, the man who owns this airline, the man who signs your paycheck. The world stopped. For Susan Reynolds, the floor fell away. The air was sucked from her lungs, and the confident, orderly universe she had built for herself shattered into a million pieces. The blood drained from her face. Vance. The boy's passport. Leo Maxwell. Vance. How could she have missed it? How could she have been so blind? She looked at Leo again, but she no longer saw a scruffy kid. She saw the heir to a corporate empire. She saw the face of her own spectacular, irreversible ruin. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The smugness, the authority, the pride, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of pure, unadulterated terror. "Oh God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God." Eleanor Vance turned to the head of security. "Please escort Ms. Reynolds to the airport HR office. Her credentials and access passes are to be revoked immediately. She is not to set foot on another Apex Air aircraft or property, again pending the outcome of a full investigation." The security chief nodded and stepped toward the now trembling flight attendant. "Ma'am, please come with me." Susan was paralyzed, her mind replaying the last hour in a horrifying high-speed loop. The condescending tone, the sneer, the rip, the final fatal rip of the ticket. As the security guards gently but firmly took her by the arm, her eyes locked with Leo's. In his gaze, she didn't see triumph or malice. She just saw the deep, lingering hurt she had inflicted upon a child, and that somehow was the most damning judgment of all. As Susan Reynolds was escorted away, a ghost in her own uniform, a profound silence descended upon the gate area. Maria, the junior agent, stood frozen behind the counter, looking as if she had just witnessed a lightning strike. David Chen, the airport GM, cleared his throat, breaking the spell. The priority now was damage control. Eleanor Vance walked over to Leo. Her entire demeanor, which had been fearsome and commanding a moment before, softened completely. She knelt so that she was at eye level with him, her expression one of deep, sincere remorse. "Leo," she said, her voice gentle, "my name is Eleanor Vance. On behalf of every single person at Apex Air, I want to say I am so sorry for what you just experienced. There is no excuse for it. It was unprofessional, it was unacceptable, and it was wrong." Leo looked at her, his eyes still red-rimmed. He simply nodded, clutching the torn ticket in his hand. "Can we get you anything?" Eleanor asked. "Some water. A snack from the first-class lounge." "I just want to go to London," he said quietly. "Of course," she said, giving him a small, sad smile. "We're going to make that happen right now." She stood and turned to Maria, who flinched as if expecting to be fired next. Instead, Eleanor's expression was encouraging. "Maria, is it? Can you please print a new boarding pass for Mr. Vance seat 2A? "Yes, ma'am. Right away," Maria said, her hands shaking slightly as she typed at her console. A fresh, crisp boarding pass emerged from the printer. Eleanor personally took it and handed it to Leo. "Here you are. Now I will be personally escorting you onto the aircraft to make sure you get settled in comfortably." Just as she was about to lead Leo toward the jet bridge, a new figure arrived at the gate, moving with a speed that belied his calm exterior. It was Marcus Vance. He had broken every speed limit between his office and the airport, his mind a maelstrom of protective fury. But as he saw his son safe and sound being treated with care by his top executive, his expression relaxed fractionally. The first thing he did was walk directly to Leo, bypassing the group of high-level managers. He knelt just as Eleanor had and pulled his son into a firm, loving hug. "Are you okay?" Marcus whispered into his son's hair. Leo nodded, burying his face in his father's shoulder, the tension and fear of the last hour finally melting away in the safety of his father's arms. Marcus held him for a long moment, before looking up at his assembled team. His eyes were hard as steel. "Report," he said, his voice low, but carrying immense weight. Eleanor stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, the employee responsible, Susan Reynolds, has had her credentials revoked and has been escorted to HR. She is suspended indefinitely, effective immediately. The flight was placed on a ground hold as you ordered. Leo has been issued a new boarding pass, and I was just about to escort him aboard." Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "What about the other passengers? They're still on board, waiting," David Chen said. "The flight crew has been informed there's a delay due to a gate issue." "Good," Marcus said. He then looked at Maria. "You." "What's your name?" "Maria Sanchez, sir." She stammered, her eyes wide. "Did you witness this event, Ms. Sanchez?" "Yes, sir, I did." "And what did you do?" Maria swallowed hard, convinced her inaction had doomed her. "Nothing, sir. I suggested she scan the ticket, but she told me to stay out of it. I'm new. I was scared. I'm sorry." Marcus studied her for a moment. He saw not incompetence, but honesty and remorse. "You were intimidated by a senior employee who was abusing her authority. That's a failure of our corporate culture, Ms. Sanchez, not yours. You showed concern for my son, and you were honest with me now. That's more than I can say for the 22-year veteran." He turned to Eleanor. "I want Ms. Sanchez promoted. Gate supervisor. Effective Monday. And enroll her in a leadership training program. We need more people with her instincts in charge, not fewer." Maria's jaw dropped. She stared at the CEO, speechless, a whirlwind of shock and gratitude, rendering her unable to form words. Marcus then turned his attention back to Leo. "Son, are you ready to go?" Leo nodded. "Okay. But first, there's one more thing we need to do." Marcus stood up and took Leo by the hand. He walked them both to the entrance of the jet bridge with Eleanor and the other executives following. He turned to the lead pilot and the new in-charge flight attendant who had come to the door to see what the commotion was about. Captain Marcus said, his voice resonating with authority. "I am Marcus Vance. I apologize for the delay. We had a disciplinary issue with a member of your crew which has now been resolved. But this delay was caused by one of our employees, and our customers should not be the ones to suffer for it." He then turned to his son. "Leo and I are going to board this plane. We are going to walk into the first-class cabin. And then I am going to get on the intercom, and I am going to apologize to every single passenger on this flight for the delay. I will explain that it was caused by an employee who failed to live up to the standard of respect and dignity that Apex Air demands. And I will announce that every passenger on this flight, from first class to the last row of economy, will be receiving a full refund for their ticket and a voucher for a future international flight on us." Eleanor Vance's eyes widened slightly at the immense cost of this decision, but she didn't dare question it. This was no longer just about his son. It was a statement. It was Marcus Vance reminding his entire company from the boardroom to the baggage handlers what their values were supposed to be. He looked down at Leo. People make mistakes, but powerful people have a responsibility to make things right, loudly and publicly. Let's go. Hand in hand, the billionaire father and his 12-year-old son walked down the jet bridge, ready to face the passengers. The lesson of the day had shifted from humility to accountability. The consequences for Susan Reynolds were swift, brutal, and far-reaching. Her suspension as she sat in a sterile, windowless HR office at JFK was merely the first domino to fall. The full investigation was less of an inquiry and more of a formality. Multiple passengers from the boarding line had already emailed Apex Air customer service describing the incident in vivid, damning detail. One passenger, a tech blogger who had been flying to a conference in London, had discreetly filmed the moment Susan ripped the ticket. By the time Flight 815 was pushing back from the gate, with Leo comfortably settled in Seat 2A, watching a movie, and Marcus Vance in Seat 2B, having decided to fly to London with him, the video was already live on Twitter. It was posted with a simple, devastating caption, "Apex Air flight attendant rips up ticket of a 12-year-old black child, accusing him of fraud. Is this your company policy?" Apex Air. The post exploded. Within an hour, it had thousands of retweets. By the time the plane was over the Atlantic, it was a trending topic. The Court of Public Opinion delivered its verdict long before Apex Air's HR department could finish its paperwork. Susan Reynolds was not just an employee who made a mistake. She was the face of corporate prejudice, a viral villain in a 45-second clip. Her termination was confirmed via email before she even got home. The official reason was gross misconduct and violation of the company's code of conduct and anti-discrimination policies. But that was only the beginning of her unraveling. The flight attendants' union, after reviewing the video and the overwhelming number of witness statements, declined to support her appeal. They issued a statement condemning her actions, effectively disowning her. Her name was leaked to the media, and news vans were camped outside her modest suburban home by morning. She was inundated with hateful messages, her digital life dismantled by online vigilantes. She found herself completely unemployable. The airline industry is a small, interconnected world. No other major carrier would touch her. Her name was blacklisted. The 22 years of seniority, the pension she was close to securing, the pride she took in her job, all of it was gone, incinerated in a single moment of arrogance. She had to sell her home within 6 months to cover her legal fees after the Vance family's lawyers quietly filed a civil suit against her for emotional distress, the settlement of which would garnish any future wages she might earn. But the karma was not solely punitive. Marcus Vance was a builder, not just a destroyer. He saw the rot Susan represented, not as a single bad apple, but as a potential symptom of a deeper disease within his company. He was determined to turn this ugly incident into a catalyst for genuine change. Within a week, Apex Air announced a complete overhaul of its customer service and anti-bias training. The new mandatory certification program for all 30,000 of its public-facing employees was officially named the Leo Vance Initiative for Dignity and Respect. It used the anonymized JFK incident as its core case study of how implicit bias can lead to catastrophic failure. Maria Sanchez, as promised, was promoted. On her first day as gate supervisor, she found a handwritten note on her new desk. It was from Marcus Vance. It read, "Maria, thank you for your integrity. Never be afraid to do the right thing. You represent the future of this airline." She framed it. The story had another unexpected ripple effect. The tech blogger who posted the original video saw his own profile skyrocket. He was invited onto news channels to discuss the incident, and he used the platform to talk about the daily microaggressions and biases that people of color face while traveling. The conversation became bigger than one flight attendant and one boy. It became a national dialogue about perception, privilege, and prejudice. Marcus Vance ensured that the financial settlement from the lawsuit against Susan didn't go to his family, who didn't need it. Instead, the funds were used to create a scholarship foundation. The Apex Scholars Program would provide funding for underprivileged students who wanted to pursue careers in aviation, from piloting and engineering to air traffic control. The karma that hit Susan Reynolds was hard and personal. It was the complete dismantling of a life built on a fragile foundation of authority and prejudice. But the karma that grew from the incident was constructive. It rebuilt a small part of the corporate culture at Apex Air. It elevated a deserving employee. And it created opportunities for young people who might otherwise have never dreamed of reaching the skies. The hole left by one employee's downfall was filled with the foundations of something better and more enduring. The Airbus A350 was a ghost ship sailing through an ocean of stars. At an altitude of 38,000 feet, the world and its turmoil felt a universe away. Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was one of engineered tranquility. The lighting was dimmed to a soft, warm glow. The air was a constant, comfortable temperature, and the gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce engines was a soothing, monotonous hum. Passengers were nestled in their private pods, lost to sleep, or the quiet glow of their entertainment screens. It was a sanctuary of peace, a stark and surreal contrast to the raw public humiliation Leo had endured at the gate only a few hours before. Leo wasn't watching a movie. He had tried, but the vibrant colors and cheerful dialogue of the animated film felt hollow, an echo from a world he no longer fully inhabited. He had the screen off his face, turned toward the triple-layered window. He watched the distant pinprick lights of ships on the unseen Atlantic below and the impossible diamond dust of the Milky Way above. He replayed the scene in his mind, a looping, silent film. The condescending tilt of Susan's head, the sharp, ugly sound of the ticket tearing, the shocked faces of the strangers in line, the hot shame that had prickled his skin. Then the second act of the film would play the arrival of the executives, their faces grim. The dawning horror on Susan's face, the palpable shift of power in the room, a current he could feel but not yet fully comprehend. And his father's arrival, a force of nature, in a tailored suit, a man who could stop a 300-ton airplane with a phone call. The feeling that washed over him then was complex, a confusing cocktail of relief, vindication, and a strange, unsettling guilt. His father Marcus had been sitting beside him, quietly working on a tablet. But he hadn't been working. He had been giving his son the space and silence he needed to process. Now he set the tablet aside. "That look on your face." Marcus began, his voice a low, gentle rumble that didn't disturb the cabin's quiet. "I've seen it before. It's the look of someone trying to make sense of a world that just showed its ugly side." Leo turned from the window, his young face etched with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 12-year-old. "What will happen to her? To Susan?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question had been weighing on him. Marcus considered it for a moment, understanding the importance of his answer. "She lost her job today, Leo. And because of the way it happened, she'll probably never work for another major airline. What she did was public, and it was a profound betrayal of the trust we place in our people. There are consequences for that." Leo looked down at his hands, resting on the soft duvet. "Is that what you wanted for her life to be? Ruined?" Marcus sighed, leaning closer. "No, I never want to see anyone's life ruined. What I wanted was accountability. There's a difference. Ruin is about destruction. Accountability is about fixing what's broken. She was a symptom of something broken inside our company culture, and she needed to be removed so we could begin to heal it. What she did to you, that wasn't just a bad mood, son. It was a choice. She chose to see you as less than because of how you looked. She chose to use her power not to help, but to hurt. That choice has a cost." He paused, then added, "Let me tell you a story. Before I had any money, before Apex Air was even a dream, I was about 19 years old. I had a job interview for an internship at a big investment bank. It was an opportunity that could have changed my life. I'd saved up for a new suit, but it was still cheap. I took 3 buses to get to the skyscraper downtown. When I got to the lobby, the security guard took one look at me, a young black man in a suit that didn't fit right, and he wouldn't let me up. He said I didn't have an appointment. I showed him the letter. He told me it was probably a fake. He made me wait in the lobby for an hour until I missed the interview, just because he decided I didn't belong. Leo's eyes were wide, trying to picture his powerful father as a helpless 19-year-old. I never forgot that feeling, Marcus said, his voice laced with the memory of that old sting, the powerlessness, the shame, the injustice of being judged by a uniform and a haircut. When you called me today, I didn't just hear my son in trouble. I heard that 19-year-old kid again, and I swore when I started my own company that I would never allow that kind of poison to take root. That a person's character would be the only thing that mattered. A flight attendant, a kind-faced woman who had introduced herself as Sarah, the new purser for the flight, approached their seats. She had seen the drama at the gate, and her expression was one of genuine sympathy. "Excuse me, Mr. Vance," she said softly. "I just wanted to apologize again on behalf of the entire crew. What you and your son experienced was horrifying, and I want to assure you that Ms. Reynolds's views do not represent ours." She then knelt slightly to speak to Leo directly. "And I am especially sorry that your first solo trip started this way. We're all very happy you're here with us. Could I get you anything at all? A hot chocolate, maybe, with extra marshmallows?" Leo, who had tensed slightly at her approach, relaxed at her warm tone. He looked at his father, who nodded his encouragement. "Yes, please," Leo said, a flicker of his usual brightness returning to his eyes. "I'd like that very much." As Sarah left with a smile, Marcus turned back to his son. "You see, the world has its Susans, but it also has its Sarahs, and its Mariahs. The good people far outnumber the bad. The problem is, the bad ones are often louder. That's why we can't be silent." He picked up his tablet again, but this time he opened a document. It was a press release draft. The headline read, "Apex Air announces the Leo Vance Initiative for Dignity and Respect." "This was a terrible day for you," Leo Marcus said, showing him the screen. "But we're not going to let it be just a bad memory. Your experience is going to become a lesson. It's going to be the core of a new training program that every single one of our employees from here to Sydney will have to take. They're going to learn about what happened today. They're going to learn to see a person, not a stereotype. Your name won't just be on the side of our planes. It will be a symbol of our promise to do better. You're going to help a lot of people by what you went through." Leo read the words, his own name staring back at him. The Leo Vance Initiative. A profound feeling washed over him, the feeling of his pain being transformed into purpose. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a catalyst. The hot chocolate arrived, a magnificent confection, in a porcelain mug piled high with whipped cream and marshmallows. Leo wrapped his hands around its warmth, the sweetness a welcome comfort. He took a sip, the knot of anxiety that had been clenched in his stomach for hours, finally starting to unwind. He was safe. He was with his father. And he understood. He understood the hard lesson about the world's unfairness, but he also understood the immense power of accountability, the quiet strength of character, and the responsibility that came with a name like Vance. He leaned his head against the plush seat, the rich chocolate warming him from the inside out. He was flying high above a world that had tried to tear him down, but had only lifted him higher. and for the first time that day, he felt truly at peace. And so a single act of prejudice at Gate B42 didn't just end one career, it sparked a wave of change. It served as a harsh reminder that our judgments, especially those based on looks, can have devastating and unforeseen consequences. The story of Leo Vance and Susan Reynolds shows us that karma isn't always a mystical force. Sometimes it's a direct and swift result of our own actions, delivered by the very systems we believe we control. This incident became more than just a viral video. It became a lesson in corporate responsibility, a testament to a father's love, and a learning moment for a young boy who now understands the true weight of his name. What did you think of the consequences Susan faced? Were they justified? Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone's prejudice came back to haunt them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next story we have in store. Thank you for listening.